It seems like every day there's a new headline about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
One day it's the best investment ever, and then the next, it's some kind of massive scam.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So how are we supposed to know what's real and what's not? I mean, are regular people like us even supposed to try to figure out Bitcoin?
I think it's important for everyone to understand at least the basics of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency
Okay.
because, like it or not, it is becoming more mainstream and it's probably going to be a big part of our financial future in some way.
So where do we even start with all this?
Well, I think for today, let's take a deep dive specifically into Bitcoin scams.
Okay, scams.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those headlines, they always get my attention.
Right, because those are the stories that really illustrate the risks involved.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people, myself included, we hear those stories and we just get scared off completely.
Right, and that's understandable.
But I think it's also important to remember that just because there are scams out there, it doesn't mean that Bitcoin itself is a scam. It just means that, like with any new technology, criminals are going to try to take advantage of people who don't know any better.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
So let's talk about those scams. What are some of the most common ones?
Well, some of the most notorious operations we uncovered in 2022 were things like Bitcoin Code, Bitcoin Revolution, Bitcoin Storm.
Those names, they all sound kind of similar.
Yeah, and that's intentional.
Is there something to that?
They want to create this sense of legitimacy, like they're all part of some official Bitcoin network.
So they're trying to make it sound like it's all on the up and up.
Right, and they often use very similar tactics to lure people in.
Like what kinds of things are they doing?
Well, they often promise these unbelievably high returns.
Okay, yeah, I've seen those ads. Get rich quick with Bitcoin.
Exactly. They prey on that human desire for easy money, especially when it comes to something as mysterious and potentially lucrative as Bitcoin.
So they're basically saying, hey, you don't need to understand this complicated technology. Just give us your money and we'll make you a fortune.
Exactly. And that's where people get into trouble because if it sounds too good to be true,
It probably is.
it probably is.
So how do these scams actually work? Like, what are they doing with people's money?
Well, let me paint you a picture of a typical scenario.
Okay.
You're browsing online and you stumble across an ad with a really flashy headline. Something like, make $10,000 a week trading Bitcoin. No experience needed.
Yeah, I can see that.
You click the link and you're taken to a website that looks incredibly professional.
Sure.
It's filled with testimonials from supposedly satisfied users, maybe even some fake celebrity endorsements or news articles to make it seem even more legit.
So they really put on a good show, huh?
Oh, absolutely. They want to create this illusion of success and credibility, and then they'll usually ask you to deposit a small amount of money to activate your account or to access their exclusive trading software.
Right. So it starts small. That makes it seem less risky.
Exactly. They want to get you in the door, make you feel like you're part of something special.
And then what happens?
Well, this is where things get tricky. The software might show you fake profits,
Oh, well.
making you think you're actually making money. They might even let you withdraw a small amount just to gain your trust.
Like they're giving you a little taste of the good life.
Right, exactly. But the moment you try to withdraw a larger sum, that's when the problems start. They might come up with excuses, delays, demand additional fees,
Oh, no.
and ultimately, many victims end up losing everything they invested.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
So these scammers are basically playing on people's emotions, their desire for quick riches. And they're using these sophisticated websites and software to create this illusion of legitimacy.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be vigilant and to do your research before investing in anything related to Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've talked about the dangers, the red flags, and how these scams can be so convincing. But in part 2, we're going to shift gears and focus on how to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
We'll talk about how to identify legitimate trading platforms, how to do your due diligence, and how to keep your Bitcoin safe.
Looking forward to it.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into Bitcoin scams. Okay, so we've heard about the scary stuff, but how do we actually protect ourselves? I mean, where do we even begin?
Well, the good news is there are safe and legitimate ways to engage with Bitcoin.
Okay, that's good to hear.
The key is to be smart and informed, just like you would with any other financial decision.
So treat it like, I don't know, picking a bank.
Exactly. You wouldn't just hand over your money to any random person on the street, would you?
No way.
Same goes for Bitcoin. You need to do your research, choose a reputable platform or exchange, and make sure they have strong security measures in place.
Got it. So no shady back alley Bitcoin deals. We're looking for the established, trustworthy players. What are some of those?
Well, for trading platforms, some of the names you'll often hear mentioned are eToro, Capital.com, Bitpanda.
Okay, those ring a bell.
These platforms have been around for a while, they've got a large user base, and they're generally considered pretty reliable.
But they're different from exchanges, right?
Right. Trading platforms are more like brokerages where you're buying and selling Bitcoin at market prices.
Okay, so more like traditional stock trading.
Yeah. Exchanges, on the other hand, are more like marketplaces where buyers and sellers connect directly.
So more peer-to-peer.
Exactly. Some of the big names in the exchange world are Binance, Coinbase, Kraken.
Those sound familiar too.
Yeah.
But how do we know if any of these platforms, whether it's a trading platform or an exchange, is actually legitimate? What should we be looking for?
That's a great question. First off, transparency is huge. A trustworthy platform should clearly outline their fees, security protocols, and any regulatory compliance they have.
Right, so no hidden surprises.
Exactly. You should also be able to find reviews and feedback from other users.
Okay, so do some digging, read what other people are saying, makes sense. But what about red flags? Are there any warning signs that should make us run in the opposite direction?
Absolutely. One of the biggest ones is the promise of guaranteed returns.
Ah, yeah, like those get-rich-quick schemes we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Remember, Bitcoin is a volatile asset. No legitimate platform can guarantee you'll make money. If they are making those kinds of claims, it's a major red flag.
Got it. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. What about the websites themselves? Any clues there that might point to a scam?
Sometimes, scam platforms often have websites that look flashy and professional, but lack substance.
Style over substance.
Yeah, they might be full of vague claims and jargon, but provide very little concrete information about their team, their technology, or their regulatory status.
Okay, so dig a little deeper. Don't just be impressed by a fancy website.
Right.
What about customer support? Is that something we should be paying attention to?
Definitely. Reputable platforms will have responsive and helpful customer support. You should be able to easily reach them through various channels like email, phone, or live chat. If a platform makes it difficult to contact them or avoids answering your questions directly, that's a bad sign.
Like they're hiding something.
Oh, right. They might be.
So it's about building trust. A legitimate platform will be transparent and accountable to its users. Okay, so we've covered a lot about choosing a platform, but what about the actual Bitcoin itself? How do we keep it safe once we've bought it?
Well, that's where things like cold wallets come in. Have you heard of those?
I have, but I'm not really sure what they are.
A cold wallet is basically a way to store your Bitcoin offline, completely disconnected from the internet.
So like a digital safe.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. It's a way to protect your Bitcoin from hackers and online threats.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does that work? I mean, isn't Bitcoin digital?
It is, but cold wallets use something called hardware wallets. These are small devices, often like USB drives, that can generate and store your private keys securely offline.
So no internet connection means no risk of hacking.
Exactly. It significantly reduces the risk because your keys are never exposed online.
That sounds pretty secure. So if you're serious about investing in Bitcoin, a cold wallet seems like a good idea.
Definitely. It adds an extra layer of security and peace of mind, especially if you're holding a larger amount of Bitcoin.
Right. You know, it's interesting how we've gone from these flashy scam websites promising instant riches to talking about offline storage devices. It really shows the two sides of the Bitcoin world.
It does, and it highlights the importance of being informed and taking the right steps to protect yourself.
Absolutely. So for our listener, remember, knowledge is power when it comes to Bitcoin. Do your research, choose your platforms carefully, and consider a cold wallet for added security.
And don't forget, if something feels off, trust your instincts. There's no shame in walking away from a situation that seems suspicious.
Great advice. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've learned about the dangers of Bitcoin scams, how to identify legitimate platforms, and even how to keep our Bitcoin safe offline. Hopefully our listener is feeling a bit more confident about navigating the world of Bitcoin.
I hope so too. It's a fascinating and potentially rewarding space, but it's important to be aware of the risks and take steps to protect yourself.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something else that often comes up in the Bitcoin world: regulation. Where do governments and financial institutions stand on Bitcoin, and what kind of impact could regulation have on the future of this technology? Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive where we'll explore these questions and more. So regulation, it's a big topic and it seems like everyone has a different opinion on it. Some people think Bitcoin should be completely unregulated, a true Wild West of finance. Others argue that some level of government oversight is necessary to protect investors and prevent illegal activities. Where do you stand on this?
Well, it's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer. I think it's important to find a balance between fostering innovation and protecting consumers. Too much regulation could stifle the growth of the cryptocurrency industry. But on the other hand, a complete lack of regulation could create opportunities for fraud and manipulation.
Right, it's about finding that sweet spot. So what are governments doing right now? Are there any regulations in place?
It really varies from country to country. Some countries, like El Salvador, have fully embraced Bitcoin, even making it legal tender.
Wow, legal tender, that's a pretty big step.
It is. Other countries, like China, have taken a much stricter approach, essentially banning all cryptocurrency transactions.
It's all over the map.
It really is. And then you have countries like the US, which are somewhere in between, trying to figure out how to regulate this new asset class without stifling innovation.
So it sounds like the regulatory landscape is still very much in flux. What about financial institutions? How are banks and investment firms reacting to Bitcoin?
Initially, there was a lot of skepticism and even resistance from traditional financial institutions, but that's starting to change. More and more banks are exploring ways to incorporate cryptocurrencies into their services.
Really? So they're coming around to the idea.
It seems that way. Some banks are offering cryptocurrency custody services, allowing customers to store their Bitcoin securely. Others are even exploring the possibility of issuing their own stablecoins.
Stablecoins. What are those?
A stablecoin is a type of cryptocurrency that's designed to maintain a stable value, usually pegged to a fiat currency like the US dollar.
So it's like a digital version of a dollar.
You could say that. They're seen as a way to reduce the volatility that's often associated with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
Interesting. So it sounds like Bitcoin is slowly but surely making its way into the mainstream financial world. But what does all this mean for the average person? Should we be worried about regulation? Should we be rushing out to buy Bitcoin? What's the takeaway here?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that Bitcoin and the broader cryptocurrency landscape are constantly evolving.
It's a fast-moving space.
It is. Regulation is coming, but it's still unclear exactly what form it will take. Financial institutions are getting involved, which could bring more legitimacy to the industry, but it also raises questions about control and centralization.
So what's your advice to our listener who's maybe a little overwhelmed by all of this?
My advice would be to stay informed, do your research, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
Solid advice. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And remember, this is a long game. The story of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is still being written.
It's an exciting time to be following this technology, that's for sure. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of how Bitcoin works to the complexities of scams, regulation, and the evolving role of financial institutions.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with the knowledge and confidence to navigate this exciting but often confusing world. Remember, the key is to stay informed, be vigilant, and always do your own research before making any financial decisions. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy exploring.